Welcome to Dr. Z Show. This show is about spirituality, and in every show we bring in different guests to talk about their spiritual journeys. Today we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Jane Katra.
Hello, Dr. Z. Thank you for having me. I was born into a very wonderful family for giving me the very best education that a person could get, the very greatest opportunity to develop my mind. We were not taught anything about the purpose of life. I really thought that it was a science-minded family. The house was full of books. I was a book person and a very good student. And I've now discovered at this point in my life that the best use of my mind is to do exactly what I'm talking about here. And that is to do what my major spiritual teacher, Sri RamanaMaharshi, said was the most intelligent thing to do with a mind, and that was to put your attention on the source of your own awareness and ask, who am I? And that could reveal to a person the truth of who we are, which is not bodies, and we're not our personalities, and we're not our story. Rather, we're fields of consciousness evolving, and that I've learned on my spiritual journey that the purpose of this lifetime is to let ourselves be transformed by a higher vibration than our highly intellectual minds.
So it started out when you were very young, right? When you were a teenager and you had an experience of going to another country. Share that with our audience.
Right. It actually happened right after I graduated from college. My partner and I decided we were going to take a trip to Asia before we settled down and got a job. So we were traveling throughout Asia for a year, and during that time I had always planned that I was going to go to visit the Philippine healers in the Philippine Islands. I got the unusual notion that I would separate from my partner because he was mostly interested in hiking, and I was really interested in more spiritual things or things about consciousness. So I decided to go by myself to the Philippines so that I could view the Philippine psychic surgeons there. While I was there, I started to get the worst headache I'd ever gotten in my life, a supremely bad headache. It went on day after day after day, and after a few days of it, I couldn't eat. I wasn't sleeping, I was exhausted from not sleeping, and the pain just increased and increased. I did everything I learned how to get rid of it. I was taking aspirin and drinking water and meditating, and at some point I realized that I could not handle the pain of this headache anymore, and I was really willing to die. I was willing to kill myself to get out of the pain. I was literally out of my mind with pain. So I broke a window in this youth hostel where there was nobody else staying there but me, and I was getting ready to slash my wrist because of the pain. I tried to go out the door of the youth hostel, and I found I was locked in because this was 1974. And there was martial law in the Philippines, and dictator Ferdinand Marcos had decreed that there was a curfew. Everybody had to stay inside from 7 o'clock on.
Wow.
So I was locked in. I thought, well, I may as well just ask out there in the air if there's anybody hearing me. I'm willing to be helped. You know, I had no real concept of God or anything like that. I was raised in a science-minded family. So I said, well, I'm willing to give my life, really, in exchange for getting out of pain. And that was my last memory about this dimension until the next morning, when I found myself standing in the middle of the room of this old hotel with my arm outstretched like this, and I had wet my nightgown was wet, there were wet on the ground, and I recalled that I had been having a dream in which I had been sobbing and crying and crying and crying, and I have never sleptwalked before or after, to my knowledge.
And you were at that time 18 years old?
No,
19
I
years
was. I had just graduated college. I was maybe around 24,
old? 24.
something around there.
Okay.
When I found myself standing in the middle of the room like this, I felt as if I'd been blitzed with energy, as if I'd put my fingers into a light socket. I was just vibrating and filled with living energy, which was quite surprising because I knew I'd spent 4 days in the worst pain I'd ever had in my life, and I had not been eating or sleeping. I had been exhausted the night before. I was pretty disturbed about my situation, and I had snippets of memories of this very vivid dream I had had the night before. Well, I should tell a little bit about the dream. I found myself in another domain of consciousness, very, very bright light, and I remember being so bright, I felt like I wanted sunglasses on. And the spirit of my boyfriend who had died in high school was there, and he didn't say a word, but he was a light being.
So this is the other boyfriend, not
This is my high school boyfriend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. Someone who died.
Few years back.
In my senior year of high school.
Mm.
He was there, and there was a very kind man there who was talking about me, and he had darker skin. He reminded me of somebody from India. He was very intelligent. He was very kind. He knew all about me. He knew all about my life. He knew my feelings. He knew my thoughts. And it was as if he was instructing me. And he kept telling me I needed to listen to him, what he was going to tell me. And he directed my attention over and he said, let's watch this. And we watched what was like a video of my life. And it was very fast.
So this is happening in the dream?
Yes, in the dream. He said to me after we watched it, he said, well, what do you think? And I turned to him and I said, I spent my entire life in school. I studied so hard all my life. I did so well in school, and I never had a chance to apply anything in life. And he said, right, that's why you're going back. And I said, going back? Where am I? And he said, well, if I told you, it would disturb you so much, you wouldn't understand. He said, I need you to listen to me. And he pulled down maps of the universe, of the cosmos, and he showed me many different solar systems. And he told me that there was intelligent life throughout the cosmos, not just on Earth. He says, you're going to go back. He shows me Earth, and he shows bombs. He shows people suffering and crying out. He shows me earthquakes and volcanoes and floods and just people screaming and people in pain. And he is instructing me that humans have the capacity to influence things that happen on Earth, and that suffering has a purpose. And then he showed me a picture of the Earth with rotating, and there was light in certain places of Earth and an absence of light in other places, and there were all these little dots, which I perceived to be people. And I perceived that people could either radiate light or not. And he said, you're going to go back to Earth and you're going to be a spiritual healer. And I said, no. I'm smart. I want to be intelligent. I want to be smart. I don't want to be some sort of spiritual healer. I don't know any Bible verses. I don't go to church. None of my friends go to church. We don't go to church. I don't want to be a spiritual healer. And he says, oh yes. And he was smiling. He said, in fact, you're going to do it tomorrow. So that morning I decided to go thank the Philippine healers who had let me watch them. And I went to the Manila Hotel up to the second floor. Elevator door opens, I walk out. There is a woman writhing in pain on the sofa there, right? And she is just crying out in pain, crying out, writhing in pain. I walked over to her and I said, "Ma'am, what's going on?" And she says, "I have a horrible, horrible headache. I've had it for days. My husband's gone to try and get a doctor to give me a shot of morphine." So I'm thinking, how can I help her? And she's writhing around and moving around, and I'm hovering over her, holding my hands up like this, and all of a sudden she just goes, "Oh, oh, thank you, oh, thank you." She quits writhing around and sits up and she goes, "Thank you so much." I said, "What?" She said, "Oh, you healed me." I said, "Lady, I didn't do anything. I was getting ready to heal you. I was getting ready to massage you. I didn't do anything." And she says, "Oh yes you did." She said, "When you brought your hands close to my head," she said, "it was as if you opened a dam and all the pain flowed out." And she said, "You healed me."
So this man who came in your dream, do you recognize him? Did he come back? Any other experience you had with this man?
I can't say for sure. He definitely was a wise and kind and intelligent man who seemed to be from India.
You talked about all this pain, and then when we were talking, you said that thank for everything in life. Thank you to the people who have given you pain, or who are angry at you, or they have done something mean to you. I just kept thinking all evening about that, and I wanted to bring this question here in the show, that why we should thank the people who have given us pain.
Okay, I need to tell you that over the course of my life, I've been guided to some spiritual teachers who know more than I do about the evolution of consciousness of humanity. And my main teacher was Sri RamanaMaharshi from India. I'm a reader, so I was very influenced by the writings of a theosophical spiritual teacher named Alice Bailey. My spiritual teacher, Gangaji, told me about RamanaMaharshi. And one of my teachers, Ravi Ravindra, wrote about the science of consciousness. He gave me words for my experiences. So I will say that I have learned that crisis and despair come before an influx of higher energy, and that crisis and suffering for humanity are to bring humans to a point where they realize that all of their study, all of their learning, all of their accomplishments, everything they've ever learned, all the skills they've developed, when humans come up against a realization that none of those things are going to solve a problem that they are having in consciousness. Frequently people want to die. They realize there's suffering, they are suffering, and what I have learned is that suffering creates the readiness for humans to seek a higher level of consciousness. Suffering at the physical level, suffering at the mental or emotional level. We are meant to come up against endings so that we will seek something higher, something mysterious, something unknown that might help us. All animals seek what they need. The animals, the mammals, we have instincts to seek food to feed the physical body, seek shelter for the physical body. We're meant to seek for the development of our intelligent mind. The main two things in life that I've encountered that get humans to go on a spiritual search is catastrophic illness of the body that gives them physical pain or takes away their use of the body the way other people have, or loss of a loved one, especially loss of a child from death. These are the types of people I work with as a spiritual healer, people who have come up against their desire to live. They want to die, they're in despair, they do not know what they're supposed to do with their life. Because you look out all around us and we have a different set of challenges and we don't know how to proceed. So here I want to say that one of the basic concepts of the evolution of consciousness of humanity, which is called the ageless wisdom or esoteric wisdom, is human beings evolve by passing through various stages or levels or domains of consciousness that are hierarchical and sequential. In other words, you can't skip a stage of consciousness. And we pass through these various levels of consciousness being motivated by changing value systems. Now, the way we change value systems is by coming up against a barrier in our present way of being that simply isn't going to serve us for what we need to know to keep living. Alice Bailey said in her books in 1927 and also a book called Esoteric Healing in 1934, she said that at the turn of the century, meaning 2000, human beings will undergo a rapid shift in evolution, and they will realize that they are meant, that their job on earth is to work with energy. We're meant to learn how to activate our subtle energy system and learn how to invoke energy, how to manage it, and how to direct it in the service of humanity and for healing. And when I read that in Esoteric Healing, I realized she was speaking to me. She was speaking about what I've been teaching people, and that what I'm meant to share with people is the activation of our third eyes, which activates our subtle energy system. And Alice Bailey was living in the United States pretty much at the same time that Sri RamanaMaharshi was living in India. So I want to say that I was very mysteriously guided to the various spiritual teachers I've had. It's important for people to know how humorous and mysterious and surprising that spiritual teachings have come to me. For instance, I had a big leak in my house happening. I had to stay on the couch of my friend. I didn't have a bed. And so there I am lying wide awake, and I look over and she has a bookcase right next to the couch, and in it is this book that attracts me. And it's by a spiritual teacher named Alice Bailey, and it's called The Soul, the Quality of Life. I asked my friend if I could borrow it. It had never been read before, you could tell. And she said, oh yeah, somebody gave that to me years ago, I haven't read it, sure, take it. Well, of course, had to sit on my bookshelf for a while until I read it, because it's very dense. Alice Bailey's teachings are very dense, very difficult. How did I start to read that book? I became very, very ill. I was bedridden. I was weak. I found out I had 2 bouts of mononucleosis, one after the other. I knew there was a way I could use this time in bed usefully, and I'll start reading the Alice Bailey books. So what I want to make clear is I've had various times in my life where I've had severe physical illness or physical pain, and it has led to an influx of higher energy and awakening to a greater wisdom. This is how humans evolve. We evolve through crisis. And crisis proceeds, crisis is really a a fight between our lower self, our ego personality, and our higher self, which is, we'll call soul. A crisis is a message to our ego personality self that we need to evolve to a higher way of seeing the situation. We need to evolve to a higher way of being. Now, RamanaMaharshi, when people would come to him, he died in 1950 in southern India. He never left India.
So you never met RamanaMaharshi, right?
Not in this reality. He died in 1950,
Okay.
but I've met him in dreams a number of times. Another way that we get, another way that our soul intervenes in our life and gives us a nudge. So I'll just say that I was taught by Alice Bailey, by reading her books, that our conscience is the voice of our soul, and that the more we listen to it, the more we are able to hear it. She said, your soul will always guide you to good. I think it was Einstein who said that to solve a problem, you have to go to a higher level of consciousness than than the level at which the problem was created. This very much reminded me of what RamanaMaharshi would tell people when they would come to visit him and tell him they were in despair and they didn't want to live anymore. What should they do? And he said, if you don't know the truth about who you are, which only can be directly experienced, if you haven't had that experience, you are not going to know who you are. You're going to be living in ignorance. And he said, you're going to be in suffering. And he said, everything in your life is going to be pushing you to wake up out of the illusion that you are a body who's going to die, and out of the illusion that you are your emotions or you are your story. He said, humans need to wake up and directly experience that we are energy and consciousness. We are conscious energy that never dies and is simply shining through a body in this incarnation for a short period of time. So he would always tell people who came to him and asked him questions, he would say, you must find out who you are, and it will resolve all questions. And he left teachings for humanity, which he called were the most direct way for humans to wake up and participate in their own transformation of consciousness. He called it self-inquiry, and he said, you direct your attention within and rest it while observing your own awareness for an extended period of time. And he said, while you're doing that, you must learn to have a stable and alert and awake attention while observing your own awareness inside your head. And he said, you must be asking, who am I? And he said, getting a human being to that state of that's part of their life where they are driven to seek higher. That's what happened to me when I was in the Philippines. It was a physical crisis. I've since had a number of other crises, usually motivated by the death of someone very close to me or my partner, where I again came up against an ending of the way I was doing my life, and I did not know how to proceed. So RamanaMaharshi would tell people, you cannot get out of your despair because of the death of your children or whatever, unless you have the direct experience of who you are. And he said, actually it's a blessing what's happened to you, because he said you came into this incarnation ready to wake up out of the illusion that you are a body who's going to die. So he said you actually have lots of your life ahead of you to live a life at a higher way of being. And he said consciousness at all levels needs a body in which to evolve. And when the consciousness has evolved so that the body in which it's evolving, the body can no longer meet the needs of the evolving consciousness, the consciousness will drop the body. Ramana said humans must realize we are basically cosmic energy exchangers, and that the human being has the capacity to consciously participate in their own evolution of consciousness, and in doing so become radiators of spiritual power or spiritual healing energy. In that, bodies obey the laws of physics, but a higher order of power can intervene. And this power cannot be seen with the physical eyes. It can be seen with the inner eye when a human being has activated their subtle energy system.
You were talking about death and dying, and also the parents seeing their children die right in front of their eyes. And you had a stepdaughter also who passed into the spirit. So, and then she wanted to communicate with you also
Yes.
from the spirit side.
Yes.
So let's talk about her. What was her name, and how was your relationship with her when she was here on this plane, and then what happened when she passed?
The person we're talking about is Dr. Elizabeth Tarde. She died in 2002, a few days before her 40th birthday. She was a psychiatrist. She was psychic. She was the daughter of my partner, Russell Targ, at the time. I had gotten to know Russell and had moved to California because he had been diagnosed with a repeat of a metastatic cancer, of which doctors had told him he had 6 months to live. He had asked me if I would help him as a spiritual healer. I said I would do my best. The best thing that can happen for a spiritual healer is when the doctors say, oh, it must have been a misdiagnosis. He didn't have what we thought he had, and he's alive and well today. And Elizabeth Targ, at the time, this was about in the year around 2000, and she was a health researcher, and she was also a psychic.
And she was a medical doctor also.
Yeah, a psychiatrist, living in San Francisco, as a matter of fact. She said, I don't think you had anything to do with my father's healing. It was a misdiagnosis. And she says, I'm going to do research on spiritual healing and see if there, and the research is going to show us. So she decided to do research on men in San Francisco who had AIDS. And she divided, I think, 40 men into two groups, 20 each. 20 of them were what we'd call the control group, and they got the best medical attention available at the time. And the other 20 people got medical attention in addition to intentional therapeutic healing coming from a variety of healers around the U.S., healers of all different persuasions, Wiccan healers, Jewish healers, Christian healers, Reiki healers, anybody who was experienced in doing distant healing. So she set up the research the way good research is done. Neither she nor the patients nor other doctors or anybody knew who was in which group. It was all called double-blind. And you can read about how the research was done in my first book called Miracles of Mind. But in any case, at the end of the study, I think 5 people in the control group had died, and none of the people in the group who had been receiving healing died. And the people who had been receiving healing were vastly improved from the other group in a number of ways.
So you are saying that the people who were getting the healing were getting much better, and then the people who were just on medications were not getting as better? Or?
Yes, that's correct. The people who were receiving distant healing intentions had much many fewer doctor visits, many fewer hospitalizations, many fewer opportunistic infections, much less pain, um, fewer intubations from breathing problems, among others. So at this point, Elizabeth decided she really was believing her own research and thinking that she wanted to be a spiritual healer, but instead she ended up getting a brain cancer, and she died in July of 2002. I had been taking care of her in the 72 days that occurred between her time of diagnosis and the time she left her body. Our relationship totally transformed at the time when she was ill, and that she realized that I was a loving spiritual healer. And she said, well, what I really wanted to do, Jane, was be the Virgin Mary's assistant. And I said, whoa, Elizabeth, I said, well, I know you were raised Jewish, and you know, she had a medical degree, and she'd become a Buddhist. So I said, Elizabeth, I've never heard you talk about the Virgin Mary. What does the Virgin Mary's assistant do? And she said, the Virgin Mary's assistant, you have to know she's on pain drugs at this point. She's had brain surgery. You know, she's in her last days of being able to talk. She says, the Virgin Mary's assistant helps people to love and helps people to heal. And I told her that I knew that her work here was not over. I said, Elizabeth, I know you have such strong intentions to help people heal, that you're going to continue for wherever you are. Because at this point, she believed, because of her Buddhist tradition, that when a person dies, they go into the nothingness and all their molecules disperse and just be part of the one consciousness, and there's no individuality after death. I had a different experience and a different belief system. And of course she wanted me to tell her, why did I think that we don't just totally disappear when we drop our bodies? And I told her various things, you know, all the near-death experiences people have had, all the information that comes through mediums, and certainly all the after-death communications that people have. And then you have great spiritual teachings from evolved souls such as Jesus Christ and RamanaMaharshi, who tell us that our true nature is consciousness, and consciousness never dies. It just comes into different bodies, and we're constantly evolving.
So Elizabeth passed into spirit, and did she come back to you, and did she make visit with you after passing into the spirit?
This is true, she did. Within about an hour after she had stopped breathing, I went back home, was sharing a bedroom with her dad, and she appeared and awakened both of us separately. She was vibrating love, intense vibrating love, pulsing pink light in the bedroom. We both perceived her as being up in the same place, up near the ceiling, and that we both perceived she had come to say goodbye, and she was pulsing love. It was a direct experience of her that had vibration and love. It was all about vibration and love. That was her first communication.
So last night, you know, we did the phone reading, and she was there.
Yes.
Could you really feel her energy?
Yes, I could. When I now occasionally communicate with a number of people I've loved in this lifetime, and each vibratory quality and power is different for each person, but it is always love. To me, love is the power that allows us to communicate, whether you're in or out of a physical body. It's also now a beautiful experience of light and joy, and it puts this smile on my face. And I love it when I hear from Elizabeth, because I know that we are working together. She in fact told me years ago, she contacted somebody in Norway who I had met briefly. Elizabeth had predicted that she was going to communicate by squeezing my upper right arm over and over, and that she what happened is this woman in Norway calls me up and says I have the profound experience of the spirit of Dr. Elizabeth Tarde standing next to me, and she's squeezing my upper right arm over and over again, and she has a message for you. And I said, well, okay, I'm ready to hear it. And she said, she really wants you to know that you are meant to be talking about these communications from her, and that is your contribution to the field of parapsychology, and it's part of your contribution to society, because you're a studious and learned person, and people need to hear that after-death communications are real and that they are part of healing. RamanaMaharshi taught that the highest use of this lifetime was to realize the truth of who we are, which is immortal fields of radiating, loving, vibrating awareness, and let that inner light energy build up within the body so that it radiates out as what's been called spiritual power, or a power that can intervene in the laws of physics.
So, Dr. Jane, you did a lot of healing to the people in the church and in your workshop, and I was just wondering, can you demonstrate your healing on me?
Sure, Dr. Z. When a person learns to bring energy into their body and learns to direct it for healing, you can send it into the body like this.
I can feel it.
Yeah. You can direct energy to heal physical symptoms of the body, or you can direct it in such a way that you directly experience your own energy field